Hare Krishna to all dear devotees. Hare Krishna Daiva Shakti Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All voice to Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. Mataji, whenever you are ready, you can please start, Mataji.
Thank you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudiraye Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhavati Uttama Sloke Bhakti Bhavati Anaishtuke. Hare Krishna to all the assembled devotees. Today we'll be reading from chapter 20, the rainy season and autumn in Vrindavan, starting with text 1. Sukadev Goswami said, to the ladies of Vrindavan, the cowherd boys then related in full detail Krishna's and Balaram's wonderful activities of delivering them from the forest fire and killing the demon Palamba. Text 2. The elder cowherd men and ladies were amazed to hear this account, and they concluded that Krishna and Balaram must be exalted demigods who had appeared in Vrindavan. Text 3. Then the rainy season began, giving life and sustenance to all living beings. The sky began to rumble with thunder, and lightning flashed on the horizon. Text 4. The sky was then covered by dense blue clouds, accompanied by lightning and thunder. Thus, the sky and its natural illumination were covered in the same way that the spirit soul is covered by the three modes of material nature. Text 5. With its rays, the sun had for 8 months drunk up the earth's wealth in the form of water. Now that the proper time had arrived, the sun began releasing this accumulated wealth. Text 6. Flashing with lightning, great clouds were shaken and swept about by fierce winds. Just like merciful persons, the clouds gave their lives for the pleasure of this world. Text 7. The earth had been emaciated by the summer heat, but she became fully nourished again when moistened by the god of rain. Thus the earth was like a person whose body had been emaciated by austerities and undergone for a material purpose, but who again becomes fully nourished when he achieves the fruit of those austerities. Text 8. In the evening, twilight during the rainy season, the darkness allowed the glowworms, but not the stars, to shine forth. Just as in the age of Kali, the predominance of sinful activities allows atheistic doctrines to overshadow the true knowledge of the Vedas. Text 9. The frogs, who had all along been lying silent, suddenly began croaking when they heard the rumbling of the rain clouds. In the same way that Brahmana students who perform their morning duties in silence begin reciting their lessons when called by their teacher. Text 10. With the advent of the rainy season, the insignificant streams, which had become dry, began to swell and then strayed from their proper courses, like the body, property, and money of a man controlled by the urges of his senses. Text 11. The newly grown grass made the earth emerald green. The Indragopa insects added a reddish hue, and white mushrooms added further color and circles of shade. Thus, the earth appeared like a person who has suddenly become rich. With their wealth, text 12, with their wealth of grains, the fields gave joy to the farmers. But those fields created remorse in the hearts of those who were too proud to engage in farming and who fail to understand how everything is under the control of the Supreme. Text 13. As all creatures of the land and water took advantage of the newly fallen rainwater, their forms became attractive and pleasing, just as a devotee becomes beautiful by engaging in the service of the Supreme Lord. Text 14. Where the rivers joined the ocean, it became agitated, its waves blown about by the wind, just as the mind of an immature yogi becomes agitated because he is still tainted by lust and attached to the objects of sense gratification. Text 15. Just as devotees whose minds are absorbed in the personality of Godhead remain peaceful even when attacked by all sorts of dangers, the mountains in the rainy season were not at all disturbed by the repeated striking of the rain bearing clouds. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Hare Krishna Chaitanya Chandra Das Prabhuji, please accept our humble obeisances. All wish to Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. Prabhuji, please take over the call, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you, Dhanur Pranam. Thank you, Devichakti Mataji, for reading the translations today. Thank you all dear devotees for coming together to read Srimad Bhagavatam from Canto 10, Chapter 20, text 1 to 15 today. I'll start by offering my prayers. Om Gyantimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. नमः ओं विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जयो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपा तमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुदीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्य ईश्वरम् Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So, we are continuing this wonderful description of Lord Krishna and his wonderful pastimes in the holy land of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Just in the past few discussions, we have seen how the demon Pralambasur was delivered, and then when all the gopas, when they were out in the forest and were surrounded by this devastating forest fire, how Sri Krishna easily swallows up, devours this forest fire, and surprises everybody and gives pleasure to all the gopas and gopis of Vrindavan. So after doing these wonderful pastimes in the forest, now Sri Shukdev Goswami goes on to describe that the cowherd boys return back to the village of Vrindavan, and now they are sharing this wonderful pastimes with all the ladies of Vrindavan who couldn't accompany the boys to the forest, but the one and shared in full detail the wonderful pastimes of Krishna and Balram. So normally in this material world, we see that when we talk about other people's activities and all, it's normally like gossiping and normally does not add any benefit. But when we talk about Lord Krishna's pastimes, his dealings, what he did, how he delivered the demons, then we are spiritually enriched and we advance in our bhakti. Bhagavan says in chapter 10, Bhagavad Gita, Shlok 9, Machchitta Madkatha Prana Bodhayanta Parasparam Kathayantascha Mam Nityam Tushyanti Charamanti Cha. That my dear devotees, who are always keeping me in their thoughts, in their minds, they take great pleasure, Kathayantascha Mam Nityam, in ever discussing my wonderful pastimes. This is a very uh, clear example or a point that we can understand that when we meet with devotees, when we interact with devotees, there are so many things that we can discuss about problems in this material world, different challenges that we are facing. But we should also try to hear from one another about the different pastimes of the Lord. And that is what is going to spiritually nourish us, enrich us, and help us advance in bhakti. So whenever we meet someone, she always say, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, what have you learned? Can you share something you've read this past week, something you've heard in a nice lecture? And in that way, we can have a wonderful spiritually uplifting exchange with other Vaishnavas, and that is the proper Vaishnava association that we can get. In this way, all the cowherd boys were, so wonderfully describing this pastime of the swallowing of the fire and killing of Pralambasur demon. And then the Gopas, they reacted with such amazement. The elder cowherd men and ladies, even though they've heard and seen so many times that before this also, our Sri Krishna has delivered so many asuras, but still they were hearing this in such amazement, and that is Krishna consciousness. It is so ever fresh. Even if we hear this one pastime so many times, because Krishna and his pastimes are not material, they are not stale, they do not become boring, they become ever enriching and ever livening. So when they hear these pastimes, they were so amazed, and they all concluded, just like the cowherd boys and friends, that they must be special personalities like exalted demigods who have appeared in Vrindavan. But that never affected their loving dealings that they had with Krishna and Balram. So in this particular way, the wonderful pastimes occurred in the land of Vrindavan, and this is how life went. Now, Srila Shukadev Goswami is going on to describe, and that is the main theme of today's discussion, is going to be the poetic expression of the season of the rainy season. We call it the monsoon season in India. In the Hindi dictionary, it is called as the month of Shravan. And in this particular season, things appear so beautiful. Things become completely enamoring. It's almost as if a dead person's come back to life. And Srila Shukadev Goswami, what he's going to do is something very, very important. He's going to give us some wonderful analogies that when we experience the monsoon season ourselves, when we experience even the rainy season in our part of the country over here, we see that in the spring we'll have spring showers. What we can correlate with when we go through the rainy season. And this is a wonderful way that we can incorporate Krishna consciousness into our daily lives. And Sri Amrendra Prabhu, he sometimes takes kids classes, and oftentimes he plays games with them. I'm going to give you something. How can you relate that thing to Krishna? And they all give their different ideas and opinions. And the idea is to try and relate everything around us so that we can try and remember Krishna at each time. So here, Srila Shukdev Goswami is sort of giving us this wonderful description that in the rainy season, how each and every element of the weather that we experience, we can understand how that can be spiritually connecting us to Krishna. So he begins that in the rainy season, now next the rainy season began, giving life and sustenance to all living beings. The skies began to rumble with thunder, and lightning flashed on the horizon. So it is said that that once the rainy season began, the newly formed monsoon clouds started to appear in the sky. And the purport, it is described that these newly formed monsoon clouds is actually the one of the most closest or apt description of the hue of Sri Krishna's body. That his appearance, his personality, his color looks like the newly formed rain cloud. Srila Jayadev Goswami in Gita Govind, a wonderful prayer, he says in one part describing the beauty of Lord Krishna, he says, Abhinava Jaladhara Sundarahe. That Lord Krishna is like a newly formed, Jaladhar means rain cloud. And that is this wonderful beauty of Sri Krishna. So when we see the rain clouds in the monsoon appearing, we can all think and remember our Sri Krishna. In text 4, it goes on to describe the sky was covered by dense clouds accompanied by lightning and thunder. Thus, the sky and its natural illumination were covered in the same way that the spirit soul is covered by the three modes of material nature. So, very, very apt example is given here that what happens in the monsoon, and we see this when the 3 or 4 consecutive rainy days, sometimes we don't see the sun for a week. That it's just gloomy, everything's dark, it's just raining, it's wet everywhere. and things can become a little depressing. But what we should understand that if we don't see the sun, does not mean that the sun is not there. It's just that the sun is covered. And it's just the example analogy given here is just like the spirit soul is covered by the three modes of material nature. In the purport to this shloka, Srila Prabhupada explains that the lightning that we see during the time of this rainy season, that represents the mode of goodness. The rumbling that we see, the thunder, that represents the mode of passion. And the darkness that's created by the cloud, that represents the mode of ignorance. So between this lightning, the thunder, and the darkness created by the clouds, the brightness of the sun is hidden from the world. So even though the bright sun is there, that intensity of the sun is not able to shine. And this is the same principle that Sri Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita when he describes about the consciousness of different living entities. He describes that each living entity is a beautiful part and parcel of himself, but they are covered because of their different layers of degrees of ignorance. And he gives the example of how the mirror is covered with the dust in the most least covering. In the moderate amount of covering, the trees, the fire is covered by smoke. And in the gravest amount of covering is just like a fetus is covered by the womb. So something that has great inner potential but is not coming out in front of the world is what we can see in this rainy season, where these different elements of nature, the lightning, the thunder, the dark clouds, are covering the beautiful spark of the spirit soul. Um, I had this practical experience recently when I was on a flight, and we were about 20 minutes from landing. We were up in the sky and there was such bright sun and everything looked so pleasing and wonderful. It was an early morning flight. But 10 minutes later, as soon as we descended down to hit the runway and we passed a cloud cover, everything became so dark and gloomy. And I was so amazed as that just 10 minutes ago, we were in such bright weather and atmosphere. And now 10 minutes later, everything's become so dark and gloomy. So similarly, the spirit soul by nature, being a part and parcel of Krishna, is Satchit Anand Swarup. It's eternally happy, is full of bliss, eternal and full of knowledge. But these coverings of the material nature make it gloomy and depressed in this material world. That is what one thing we can understand from this particular analogy. In text 5 is described that before the rainy season comes the summer season, and in the summer season and prior to that, the sun has drunk up the earth's wealth in the form of water. By the scorching heat, things become dry, leaves fall, everything becomes brown. But now that the proper time has arrived, but the sun, it's extracting the wealth or drying up the land, but at the same time, the sun is also creating clouds. As we know through the water cycle in basic science, the sun helps evaporate the water from the ocean, it forms clouds, and then the clouds are delivered back inland so that the water can be delivered back to the earth. So in the next few seasons, the sun now returns the favor and gives the water back. Srila Prabhupada compares this just to an appropriate governance system. So government are supposed to take tax so that they can maintain public property and public facilities. But it's just not that they should just keep taking, but they're also supposed to give back, just like in the rainy season, the sun gives back the water to the earth. This was an example of good governance that the Raja Rishis, so many kings that have been described in the Srimad Bhagavatam have displayed by their own examples. We see how Maharaj Janak was such an amazing king and how he took care of all his subjects so well. Similarly, all kings who are spiritually inclined, they make sure that nobody in their kingdom is suffering, and even though they extract tax from them, but at the right time, they make sure they give it back so that people in this world, at least their material miseries are minimized so that they can focus more and more in their spiritual development. In text 6 goes on to describe that again these flashing clouds, great clouds, were shaken and swept by fierce winds, just like merciful persons who give up their life for the pleasure of the Lord. So these clouds, when they downpour when you see that after a period of rain, suddenly the clouds will dissipate or disappear, because a lot of these clouds are just made of water particles that are descending, and then they'll disappear. It's almost as if they're compared to compassionate souls who, they seeing the misery of people in this world, they give up their own comforts, they give up their own safety sometimes, and they do acts of benefit to this material world. Srila Prabhupada gives the example of Maharaj Dashrath, that Maharaj Dashrath, he was such a strong Kshatriya, that when he used to fight, it was like just like he is uprooting weeds from the forest. He would he was completely annihilate his enemies. But when he used to give charity, then he is compared to a cloud giving rain. He would give charity to such an extent that, even more than what the other person needed, just to make sure that everybody is fully satisfied in his kingdom. So in this way, he did not care for his own comforts. When I was reading this, and I was thinking about that, that is so true, that people who are so merciful and compassionate in this world, they really do not think about themselves, and sometimes they even take great risks. I immediately could just remember and be grateful, from the bottom of my heart, for His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. So when we come into path of bhakti, when we read the Bhagavatam, when we hear so many wonderful kathas, our we think about, or at least our aim becomes, that we would also one day, be able to chant the names of Lord with complete dedication, and have this pure Krishna prem in our heart, and ultimately be able to reside in the mood of Vrindavan, in a holy dham, and be able to serve. And if we think, if we see Srila Prabhupada's life story, he had already achieved that. He went through so many difficulties in life, even as a grihast. He faced so many challenges, and then he gave up the grihast life, and then he goes to Vrindavan, and in Vrindavan he studies, and he and relishes Srimad Bhagavatam so much. He's given the title of Bhakti Vedanta. He's respected by so many other rishis, so many other saints in Vrindavan, and he's perfectly situated. He is in the courtyard of Radha Damodar temple. He is praying next to the samadhi of Srila Rupa Goswami. He has achieved what many of us might think would be the goal of life, even after coming to spiritual life. But just like a rainfall cloud who gives up his own existence, his own comfort, his own safety, just to bring nourishment to the world, Srila Prabhupada, even at that age, gave up what we might think would be the goal of life in order to benefit other people. And we all knew how much great risks he took. Even Srimati Morarji, the owner of the Scindia company, told him that you will not make it. You will die. You're 70. He did not care about it. And the only reason he did it, and he repeats that again and again so many times in his lectures, is not because he felt he wanted to do it. He felt, or he read somewhere he wanted to do it. It was because he was fully convinced that this is what is going to please my Guru Maharaj. It's going to please Krishna. So because of that great respect, that great emotion, that wonderful relationship that Srila Prabhupada had, he taught us, that is the ultimate goal of life. The ultimate goal of life may not be necessarily what we think about staying somewhere, or having a property somewhere, or doing something. But the ultimate goal of life is to see the smiling face of Sri Krishna, or the smiling face of our Guru Maharaj, who is our representative of Sri Krishna. So for their pleasure, Srila Prabhupada gave up everything just so that we can sit here today and have this discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam. So just like a rainful cloud completely gives up its own existence and enriches the whole earth with water, Srila Prabhupada, he took so much discomfort and traveled the globe so many times, so that in every town and village, the name of the Lord could be chanted. So again, wonderful analogies that Sukdev Goswami is sharing with us, so that whenever we are listening, or whenever we are going through this rainy season, since instead of being gloomy, there's so many things that we can appreciate and help us remember Krishna and his devotees. in text 7 goes on to describe that that's when the earth is going through a scorching heat in the summer season, it just becomes like somebody who's doing tapasya for a very long time and becomes completely undernourished. So we see so many times the picture um, in perfect easy journey to other planets. The cover picture, we see that saint is there with just the skeletons on himself, hardly any muscle. And we see in when Hiranyakashipu was doing tapasya for material prosperity, how he becomes so old, his body becomes shriveled and everything. And then once they get the benediction, so once the earth gets the rainwater, again everything becomes very, very pleasing. So, but Srila Prabhupada explains in this purport, but that is not the goal of tapasya. The goal of tapasya, what people do for material purposes, is only to give temporary benefits. The goal of tapasya should really be for the pleasure of Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just like I shared that an example, Srila Prabhupada did the tapasya of leaving Vrindavan Dham and coming to deliver all of us for the pleasure of Guru and Krishna. There was a devotee who had shared this wonderful story that there was this saint who was, who was meditating in the forest, and a demigod was passing by, and they were very, very pleased looking at the sincerity, the austerity of this particular saint. So they approached the saint and they said, I'm very pleased by your tapasya. So please ask for a boon, and will be happy to give it to you. So the saint said, he in this during his practice of this austerity and tapa and meditation, by the satisfaction of his guru, he had come to realize that the goal of life is actually not in this material world, but the goal of life is to go back home, back to Godhead. And he realized that the Devi Devtas are not in a position to give that boon to him. So he humbly folded his hands and told the demigod that thank you, but I'm praying because I want to be delivered from this material world and I want to go back home, back to Godhead. That is my only desire. So the demigod insists, no, 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 but I've already offered you something. So you have to take something from me. And he says, no, no, but I don't want anything. What I want, you cannot give me. I want to be delivered. I want to serve the lotus feet of Sri Sri Radha Krishna. So, but the demigod was insistent. So, not in order to show his respect to the demigod, the saint says, okay, if you want to do something, what you can do is I have a boil in my foot. You can take the boil in my foot and move it to my arm. Then you will be satisfied. Then Devin says, what kind of benediction is this? Nobody's asking for this kind of benediction. The saint says, because any benediction you give me is going to be just like that. You're going to take one material problem away and give me something which is going to create another material problem. So just like moving one boil from one foot and putting in somewhere else in the body. But I really want, what I'm looking for is the permanent solution, that I want to be back in my constitutional position as servant of Radha Krishna. So in this particular way, Srila Prabhupada elaborates in this purport that how material austerity is not that advisable. In eighth, the shloka, the purport to eighth is wonderfully written. Again, something that I thought was we could all learn from. So I recommend that if anybody has time, they can read the purport to text 8 today. But it describes that what happens is in the evening, in the rainy season, because there is cloud cover, we cannot appreciate the moon and the stars in the sky. So sometimes it's not as bright in the night also, because the moon and the stars are covered. So sometimes when we look up to the sky, high up in the trees, we can see these glowworms. So instead of seeing stars and moons, we sometimes see these glowworms, and we appreciate them and their beauty and think of them as being prominent. Srila Prabhupada describes in the purport, this is just like in the age of Kali, when the true knowledge that is being, in the analogy, is being represented by the moon and the stars. The true knowledge of bhakti is covered by the cloud cover due to age of Kali Yuga. All we see is this imperfect knowledge that is being propounded by so many different gurus, which are compared to glowworms, which although they can give some light, their light is nothing in comparison to the true light given by the the moon and the stars. So it is important to understand that we should still search for the moon and the stars and not just be satisfied by some temporary knowledge or mundane interpretations. In text 9, it goes on to describe that just in the rainy season, as soon as the thunder rumbles, the frogs begin to croak. So just like Srila Prabhupada was saying, just like when the guru instructs that this is time to wake up, the sincere student wakes up and starts to practice bhakti or recite the Vedic mantras. So similarly, frogs also in the rainy season, they start croaking as soon as the thunder rumbles. So just like the awakening of the soul into spiritual life. In text 10, again, we see that with the advent of the rainy season, the rivers begin to swell and sometimes they overflow their course, overflow their banks. Just like if somebody gets material prosperity, sometimes they can't control their senses and they start jumping and becoming ecstatic because of this temporary material prosperity. Um, but it is important to understand, Srila Prabhupada quotes the poet Vidyapati in the purport and states that, he was giving the example that how somebody becomes ecstatic when he finds a drop of water in a desert. So if you're going in a desert and you find a drop of water and become so happy, oh, this is the best thing in life. And you give up your journey looking for the ocean of mercy, because you found this drop of water. His Holiness Swami Bhagwan Keshav Maharaj, he says this point that do not give up your goal of life, which is for your ultimate benefit, for something that gives you temporary, transient, fleeting happiness. Do not derail yourself from achieving that goal in life. So similarly, in this purport, it is said that just for a little bit of temporary pleasure that we may get or the people experience in the rainy season, we should not lose control of our senses. In text 11, it is again described a beautiful description that as the earth becomes nourished with the rainwater, the greenery is spread everywhere, just like a person has become suddenly rich. And then what happens is in this rainy season, when there's wealth, the wealth of grains, the fields give joy to the farmers, but those fields create remorse in the hearts of those who are too proud. So the devotee who was sharing this purport says that just like sometimes when there is rain and when rain is falling, people who are in the city and they're not involved in farming, sometimes they find it a great inconvenience. Oh, everything's become wet, there is mud everywhere, things are, it's so difficult to go out, but they do not appreciate that it is because of this rain that our sustenance is going on, because it is rain that is nourishing the crops, it is rain that is nourishing the fruits and vegetables that we are getting to sustain. So it is important that we appreciate those things and not just look at the inconvenience. Text 13 goes on to describe that all the creatures of the land took advantage of the newly fallen rainwater and they become pleasing and attractive. So Srila Prabhupada, the devotee who was did the purport, he shares that just when anybody accepts this mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and takes to this Krishna conscious movement, they automatically within some time become bright and pleasing. It may not happen instantly, it may take some time, but it does eventually make somebody bright and pleasing. Just like when the hippies had taken to this movement, before that they were so disheveled, their hairs were not well placed, they were not wearing clean clothes. But once they became devotees, they were clean shaven, they had a beautiful smile, they appeared clean and healthy with clean washed clothes on, and they appeared so attractive. Just like in the rainy season, everything becomes so green and fresh and attractive, right? In this example, taking the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In text 14, it is said that sometimes these rivers become so full that bodies of water become agitated because so much water is flowing into them. So it's compared to an immature yogi who gets agitated because there is still some unfulfilled lust in them. So we have to understand that through this practice of bhakti, we have to become deep like an ocean, so that even if something is poured into the ocean, it doesn't matter to the ocean. Or something's taken away, that doesn't matter. But unfortunately, I can speak for myself, my heart is more like a bucket. If you pour more than water can fill in it, all of a sudden it starts overflowing. And if you take away a little bit more, then it becomes empty. But through the practice of bhakti, we try to become deep in our spiritual practice and not be affected by these things. And the last shloka for the day goes on to describe that in this rainy season, the wonderful mountains, they are not at all disturbed by the repeated striking of the rain-bearing clouds. So similarly, Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that the devotees who are firmly fixed, their dridhavrata in their practice of bhakti, whatever challenges come, they are not shaken by it. Some troublesome things happen in life, some reversals happen in life. A devotee is never ever affected by it. The devotee may feel sad, they may feel a little dejected, but they do not give up their practice of Krishna consciousness. They do not give up their service to the Supreme Lord, understanding that that is what represents their true nature. So sometimes temporary impediments may come, but just like in the rainy season, the mountains will stand strong. Similarly, a sincere devotee will stand strong in his practice of bhakti, in his sadhana, even in difficult situations. With this, we'll end our discussion today. Thank you, dear devotees, for giving your time. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavind ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Beautiful examples.